Chapter 9. The Victorious Attitude by Orison Swett Marden. Have you tried Love's Way? Love, like the sun, never sees the dark side of anything. You can purchase a man's labor. You've got to cultivate his goodwill. Sweeter than the perfume of roses is the possession of a kind, charitable, unselfish nature, a ready disposition to do for others any good in one's power. A New York man who saw a little girl carrying a crippled boy across the street offered to assist her, telling her that the boy was too heavy for her to carry. "Oh, no," said the child quickly. "He's not heavy. He's my brother." Oh, marvelous power of love that lightens all heavy burdens and smooths all rough roads. What would become of humanity were it not for love, which sweetens the hardest labor and makes self-sacrifice a joy? It is the greatest force in the universe. Without its transforming power we should still be primitive barbarians. In spite of the loud cries of pessimists and skeptics to the contrary, its light is still leading men upward, although the dream of the world's peacemakers has come to naught, and Europe is plunged in a merciless war. Yet there are multitudes of signs of the reign of love. Its merciful healing power is at work even on the cruel battlefield. We see it animating the great army of Red Cross surgeons and nurses, who, regardless of creed or country, racial or social differences, are treating all the wounded soldiers as brothers, binding up their wounds and nursing them back to health and life. Love is healing the hurts made by hate and discord. We see its influence in the miracle which the leaven of the Golden Rule is performing in the business world, in the passion for social service in the world at large, in the gradual obliteration of class distinctions, in the growing efforts to ameliorate the conditions of the poor, in the great wave of reform that is beating against the walls of all our institutions, our jails, our poorhouses, our reformatories, our insane asylums. The abuses with which these places were filled are gradually being cleared up by love. In many of our prisons the kindly brotherhood system of treatment has been inaugurated and is really helping to reform criminals, whereas the old system of penology broke their spirit or made them more hardened in crime. It rarely, if ever, reformed. Love's way must in time banish altogether the old cruel prison methods, and ultimately the criminal himself. When the world is run by love, by the Golden Rule plan, crime will die a natural death. Everyone who slips from the right path, no matter what he has done, should be given another chance, a fresh opportunity to make good, to rebuild his character. One who has sinned against society should not be expelled from the sympathies, the goodwill, and the kindness of his fellow men. Criminals should be treated as unfortunate brothers and sisters who have stumbled and lost their way on the life path. Love is the only medium that will help them to rise, to get back into the current that runs Godward. People who understand them, who see a God in the ruins that evil influences have made, would make good men and women out of the great majority of our prisoners. Many of these poor wretches never had an opportunity. They never felt the magic touch of love, never knew the influence of a good home, of honest, loving parents. Most of them did not have a right start in life. They were handicapped at birth by ignorance, by disease, by vicious parentage. They never had a fair chance. Love's way would give them one. Shutting them into cramped, miserable, sunless cells, with none of the controls or conveniences of life, where none of the humanities reach them, meting them out treatment we would not dream of inflicting on our domestic animals, is like trying to put out fire with kerosene oil. Such treatment makes them worse, arouses their basest passions of revenge, bitterness, and hatred, fills them with a determination to "get even" with society. Society is beginning to wake up to the futility of such brutal methods. It is beginning to apply Love's way to its criminal classes, to all classes. Our free hospitals, our homes for the aged and poor, our public asylums, are all, like our prisons, working up toward the light. The fallen, the sick, the poor, the old, the maimed, and the bruised and suffering, everywhere are receiving more consideration, more humane treatment, more kindness. And we are finding that greater trust in them, greater sympathy, and greater interest in our unfortunate brothers and sisters are working a marvelous change in human conditions. In other words, In spite of many seeming contradictions, many glaring evils in our midst, many setbacks and discouragements, the Spirit of the Christ of the Golden Rule is acting like a healing heaven and performing miracles in the great human mass. Love is the great mind opener, the great heart opener and life enricher, the great developer. It is what holds society together, and if children were trained to love humanity, to love all countries and their inhabitants as they are taught to love their own country and countrymen, there would be no wars. War proceeds largely from what is called patriotism, and patriotism in its narrower sense, which seeks only its own good, its own aggrandizement at the expense of other countries and peoples, has ever been the curse of the race. When our love is big enough to say, "The world is my country," wars will cease. A few days ago I was attracted by an advertisement in a morning paper which said, "When every other physician has given you up, when you have failed to find relief from all other sources, then come to me. You are the sort of person I cure." The advertiser may have been a quack, but the advertisement would make its appeal, perhaps to the desperate, the discouraged, who had been given up as incurable by the regular profession, and it set me to thinking, "Why this," I said to myself, "is the language of divine love's advertisement. Come unto me all, ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." When you have failed to find comfort, satisfaction, or joy in anything else, when your friends have deserted you, when your business is ruined, when you have made fatal mistakes and society has closed its doors on you, when everybody else rejects and denounces you, when everything else has failed, then come to me and you shall find peace and rest. Love is the sovereign remedy. It is the last resort of those driven to desperation, when nothing else is left, when life is full of bitterness and anguish. The thief, the murderer, the failure, the outcast turns to love and finds a refuge, for love never faileth. Love is to every human being what mother love is to the erring child. No son or daughter has ever fallen so low as to get beyond a mother's love. When society has turned its back on the outcast, when the prison door closes behind him, when companions have fled, when sympathy and mercy have departed, when the world has forgotten, the mother remembers and loves her child. She visits her boy in the death house, her daughter in the dens of vice in the slums. The child can never stray too far from the mother's love to follow. It is the most perfect prototype of our Father-Mother God's love. The Vedanta scriptures, which are thousands of years older than the Old Testament of our Bible, commanded us to love our neighbors as ourselves because we are all neighbors, because of the oneness of all life, because the same Spirit is in all human beings. Until we see and live in conscious cooperation with this oneness of spirit, until the world sees it in all human beings, there will be public strife, private quarrels, greed, selfish ambition, inhumanity of man to man, poverty, crime, all sorts of wretchedness and misery. Love alone can wipe all these out. Human laws, repression, punishment will never do it. Christ's way, love's way, holds the solution of all life's problems. I was talking recently with a cold-blooded, overbearing, brow-beating businessman who told me he was going out of business because he was so tired and sick of incompetent, dishonest help. His employees, he said, were always taking advantage of him, stealing, spoiling merchandise, blundering, shirking, clipping their hours. They took no interest in his welfare, their only concern being in what they found in their pay envelope. "I have enough to live on," he concluded, "and I don't propose to run a business for their benefit. I've tried every means I know of to get good work out of ignorant, selfish help, but it's no use, and now I have done it. My nervous system is worn out, and I must give up the game." You say you have tried everything you could think of in managing your employees, but has it ever occurred to you to try love's way? I asked. "Love's way," he said disgustedly. "What do you mean by that? Why, if I didn't use a club all the time, my help would ride right over me and ruin me. For years I've had to employ detectives and spies to protect my interests. What do these people know about love? Why, I would have the red flag out here in no time if I should attempt any such fool business as that." A young man who had been successful in Golden Rule management, hearing of the situation, saw in it a possible opening, and asked this man to give him a trial as manager before giving up his business altogether. The result was, he was so pleased with him that in less than half an hour he had engaged him as manager, although he still insisted that it was a very doubtful experiment. The first thing the new man did on taking charge was to call the employees in each department together and have a heart-to-heart talk with them. He told them that he had come there not only as a friend of the proprietor, but as their friend also, and that he would do everything in his power to advance their interests as well as those of the business. The house, he told them, had been losing money for years, and it was up to him and them to change all that and put the balance on the right side of the ledger. He made them see that harmony and cooperation are the basis of any real success for a concern and its employees. From the start he was very cheerful, hopeful, sympathetic, enthusiastic, encouraging. He quickly won the confidence and goodwill of everybody in the establishment, and had them all working as heartily for the success of the business as if it were their own. The place was like a great beehive, where all were industrious, happy, contented, working for the hive. So great was the change that customers began to talk about the new spirit in the house. Business grew and prospered, and in an incredibly short time the concern was making instead of losing money. Yet in many respects the new manager was not nearly as able as his employer, but he had a different spirit. He was animated by a belief in the brotherhood of man. He had sympathy, tact, diplomacy, and a real personal interest in those who worked under him. He never scolded them when they did not do right. He simply talked with them like an elder brother and made them ashamed of themselves. He showed them there was a better way, and they followed it. In short, he won their love and respect, and they would do anything for him. The Golden Rule method had driven out hate, selfishness, greed, and dissension. The interests of all were centered on the general welfare, and so all prospered. When the proprietor returned from abroad, whither he had gone for a few months' rest and recuperation, he could scarcely believe in the reality of the transformation that Love's Way had effected in his old employees and in the entire establishment. You who have been tortured and torn to pieces for years with hot tempers, with worry, with fear, with hatred and ill will, you who have already committed suicide on many years of your life, why not turn your back on all this and try Love's Way? So far your life has been a disappointment. There must be a better way for all who bear the scars and stains of strife, who have been battered and buffeted by the old evil way, in which there has been no rest, no harmony, no sweetness. Why not try Love's Way? Try it for every trouble, for every hurt and sorrow. Try it, you whose home life has been a bitter disappointment, you husbands and wives who have quarreled, who have never known what peace and comfort are. Try Love's Way. It will smooth out all your wrinkles. It will put a new spirit into your home that was never there before. It will bring a new light to your eyes, new hope into your heart, and new joy into your life. You mothers who have worn yourselves to a frazzle and prematurely aged yourselves in trying to bring up your children by scolding, nagging, punishing, driving, why not try Love's Way instead? You can love your boys and girls into obedience and respect much more quickly and with far better results to them and to yourself than by driving them. Appeal to their best and noblest instincts instead of their worst, and you will be surprised how quickly and readily they will respond to your appeal. There is something in human nature which protests against being driven or forced. If you have been trying to force your boys and girls in the past, give it up and try the new way, Love's Way. See if it does not work wonders in your home. See if it will not make your domestic machinery run more smoothly. See if it will not wonderfully relieve the strain upon yourself. Give Love's Way a trial. Try it, you fault-finding, scolding housewife. Instead of nagging your family, fretting and stewing from morning till night, blaming, upbraiding, complaining, try Love's Way. Instead of berating a maid before your guests when she accidentally breaks a piece of china, put yourself in her place. Try to realize her embarrassment and pass over the mishap cheerfully. Then in private, give her a gentle word of caution. She will be more careful in the future. If your laundress returns a piece of smirched linen, or if her work is not quite so well done as it was the last time, don't give her a brutal scolding. Harsh treatment will only make her sullen and unhappy, but you will find her susceptible to kindness and gentle words. Give sympathy and kindness instead of scolding and nagging, and you will work a revolution in your household. You will be delighted to find how quickly love's way will change the atmosphere in your family, how soon helpful relations will take the place of antagonistic ones. Praise, generous, wholehearted, unstinted praise, now and then, will not hurt anyone, but on the contrary, will act like lubricating oil on dry, squeaky machinery, and its reflex action on yourself will be magical. You husbands who have been substituting money and luxury for love, who have thought that if a woman had a fine house, beautiful clothes, and all her bills paid, she ought to be satisfied and happy. You who have so miserably failed of your object in this substitution will be surprised to find how much happier you can make your wife by bestowing on her a generous, unselfish love. A very little money, a very humble home with love will make every true woman happier than millions, a palatial home with indifference. Try love's way, you men who have been lording it over your families, bullying and browbeating your wives and children, using slave-driving methods in your home. You know that this brutal old way has not brought you happiness or satisfaction. You have always been disappointed with it. Then why not try the new philosophy? Try love's way. This is the great cure-all. It is the Christ remedy which is leavening the world. Try it, you who are worn out with the discord and the hagglings, the trials and tribulations you encounter every day in your business. You men and women who have never been able to get good help, who are driven to desperation with the wicked breakage and wastage of your employees. You who have been through purgatory in your struggle with dishonesty and inefficiency, whose faces are furrowed with cruel wrinkles and prematurely aged in trying to fight evil with evil, try love's way. It will create a new spirit in your store, your factory, your office. Whatever your business, whatever your trials and difficulties, love will ease the jolts of life and smooth your way miraculously. Try love's way, all of you who have hitherto lived in purgatory because you did not know this better way. You have tried the getting square policy, the hatred and grudge method. You have tried the revenge way, the jealousy way. You have tried the worry, the anxiety method, and these have pained and tortured you all the more. You have tried law and the courts to settle troubles and difficulties with neighbors and business associates, and perhaps you won lawsuits, only to make bitter, lifelong enemies. But perhaps you have never yet tried love's way, excepting in spots. If you have not tried it as a principle, as a life philosophy, as a great life lubricant, begin now. It will smooth out all the rough places and wonderfully ease your journey over the jolts of life. You may be wondering why you have so few friends, why you do not attract people, why others are not more interested in you. Look into your heart and you will find the reason. You are sending out a current of selfishness, of uncharitableness, unkindness, indifference, ingratitude. You cannot get a return current of friendship, of encouragement and helpfulness. The stream that leads back to you will be just like that which goes out in your thought, in your habitual mental attitude. To have friends, to win love, you must make yourself a magnet for love. You must send out the friendly thought current, the helpful current, the kindly, loving current of human fellowship. If you give out of stinginess, narrowness, meanness, selfishness, you will not receive love's gifts in return. As you give, so will you receive, and the more generously you give of love and kindness and service, the more generously will be the current that returns bear them back to you. The most beautiful thing on this earth, that which every human being craves most, is love. It is as Henry Ward Beecher said, "The river of life in this world, think not that ye know it who stand at the little tinkling rill, the first small fountain, not until you have gone through the rocky gorges and not lost the stream, not until you have gone through the meadow and the stream has widened and deepened until fleets could ride on its bosom, not until beyond the meadow you have come to the unfathomable ocean and poured your treasures into its depths. Not until then can you know what love is." All through the Bible are passages which extol the height and depth, the breadth and power, the inexhaustibleness of love. The more of love we give out, the more we have. Love maintains perpetual summer in the soul and shuts out winter's chill. Love of man is love of God, and love of God prolongs life. "With long life I will satisfy him," declares Jehovah in the words of the psalmist, "because he hath set his love upon me." Love is harmony, and harmony prolongs life, as fear, jealousy, envy, friction, and discord shorten it. Those who are filled with the Spirit of love, whose sympathies are not confined to their own family, but reach out to every member of the human family, are more exempt from the ills of mankind than the selfish and pessimistic, who lose the better part of life, the joy and the strength that come from giving themselves to others. Some natures are so permeated with the spirit of love, of helpfulness, of unselfishness, that their very presence acts like a balm upon the wounded soul. They radiate harmony, soul sunshine. There is a personal charm about them which strengthens, reassures, and uplifts. No more scientific advice was ever uttered on this earth than "love your enemies." Nothing will take the sting out of unkindness like kindness. Nothing will disarm prejudice, hatred, and jealousy like love. It is impossible for anyone to continue to hate us when we send out to him only love thoughts, love vibrations, or to be jealous of us when we send out to him only kindly, generous, helpful thoughts. Hatred, or the spirit of revenge, cannot live in the presence of love any more than an acid can retain its eating, biting qualities in the presence of an alkali. One whose heart is filled with love for all cannot possibly have an enemy very long, because love dissolves all enmity, all jealousy, neutralizes, antidotes all hatred. One-sided hatred cannot exist because there is nothing to keep it alive. It must be fed in some way, or the fire will die out for lack of fuel. It is simply impossible to keep on feeling unlucky towards another, to continue hating him very long when we discover that he feels kindly toward us and is willing to help us. I have never felt so humiliated in my life as when years ago, in my hot youth, I was rendered a very great service by a man whom I disliked intensely, and against whom I had for some time cherished a grudge. His great-hearted, generous act, which was a real help to me, made me feel utterly ashamed of myself. It showed me, as nothing else could have done, what a mean, unworthy, contemptible thing it is to nurse a feeling of hate or revenge toward a fellow being. We cannot hold the love thought without feeling the uplift, the glow, the divine energy which it sends through the whole system. Nor, on the other hand, can we hold the hate thought, the revenge, the jealous, the envious, or any other mean, selfish thought, without a feeling of depression, a feeling of smallness, of contemptibleness, which robs us of self-respect and of power. When you denounce and condemn others, when you nurse bitterness and ill will in your heart, you start boomerang vibrations which impair your cell life and seriously mar your happiness and efficiency. One of the great benefits of devotional exercise, of prayer, of contemplation, of divine thinking, is that this mental attitude sets in motion vibrations which have a helpful, uplifting influence on both mind and body. Where love and affection are habitually vibrating through the cell life, they develop a poise and serenity of character, a sweetness and strength, a peace and satisfaction that reinforce the whole being. Love soothes and strengthens. Hate lacerates, wrinkles, weakens. The character of people who keep themselves continually stirred up by discordant emotions, who live in discordant homes where there is a perpetual wrangling, criticism, denunciation, scolding, twitting, are cold, skeptical, unlovely, selfish. Their affections become marbleized. There is nothing outside of vice which will deform the character so quickly as living in an atmosphere of perpetual hatred, jealousy, envy, and revenge. The wear and tear of their vicious vibrations is ever getting in its deadly work. Love is the great disciplinarian, the supreme harmonizer, the true peacemaker. It is the great balm for all that blights happiness or breeds discontent, a sovereign panacea for malice, revenge, and all brutish passions and propensities. As cruelty melts before kindness, so the evil passions find their antidote in sweet charity and loving sympathy. One reason why a happy home is the sweetest, most beautiful spot on earth is because the love atmosphere, the harmony vibrations give a blessed sensation of harmony, of rest, of safety, security, and power. The moment we enter such a place we feel its soothing, reassuring, uplifting atmosphere. It produces a feeling of mental poise, of serenity, which we do not experience anywhere else. During a recent visit to a large family, I was much impressed by the power of one person to create this beautiful home spirit. In this family was one sister who, though the youngest member, seemed to take the place of the mother, who was dead. This young girl was the apparent center of the home. Nothing of importance was undertaken by any of her brothers without consulting her. Not one of them would leave the house without first kissing her goodbye, and she was the first one they sought when they came home. They all seemed anxious to confide to her their little secrets, to tell her of what had happened to them during the day, to have her opinion and advice in all difficulties. The secret of this young girl's influence lay in her great interest in the boys and her wonderful love for them. In talking with the brothers, I discovered that each thought that the sister was especially interested in him and his affairs, and that he would not think of undertaking or deciding anything of importance without first consulting her. Each and all of them seemed to prefer her company to that of any other young lady, and were always proud to escort her when she went anywhere. Those boys were all clean-minded, open, frank, and chivalrous, and I could not help thinking that a great deal of it was due to the sister's influence. "To love and to be loved," said Sidney Smith, "is the greatest happiness of existence." Everyone, rich and poor, high and low, is reaching out for love. What will not a man do to win the love of one who embodies his ideal of womanhood, one in whom he sees all the beautiful qualities that he himself lacks? This love is really a divine hunger, the longing for passion of what would make him a whole man instead of the half one he feels he is. Why is it that when a coarse-grained, brutal, dissipated man falls in love with a sweet, pure girl, he immediately changes his ways, looks up, thinks up, braces up, drops his profanity, is more refined, more choice in his language, more exclusive in his associations, and is, to all appearances, for the time at least, a changed man? Simply because love is a more powerful motive to the man than dissipation. He drops the latter, and if his love is steady and true, he will never again indulge in any degrading practice. Who has not seen the magic power of love in transforming rough, uncouth men into refined and devoted husbands? I have known women who had such great, loving, helpful hearts, and such charm of manner, that the worst men, the most hardened characters, would do anything in the world for them, would give up their lives even to protect them. But these men could not be reformed by prison methods, could not be touched by unkindness or compulsion. Love is the only power that could reach them. I do not believe there is any human being, in prison or out, so depraved, so low, so bad that there is somebody in the world who could control him perfectly by love, by kindness, by patience. Many a man has been kept from performing a disgraceful, criminal act by the thought that somebody loved him, believed in him, trusted him. "Though thy sins be as scarlet, they shall be made whiter than snow." Love purifies, lifts up, regenerates. We are all familiar with its wonderful transforming power, how it erases the scars of sin, smooths out the wrinkles which vice has left in the face, softens the hard features and puts its own divine stamp there. We know how it changes the coarse, brutal, sinful man into his own divine likeness, how it brings the color back to the pale cheek, the luster to the dull eye, how it restores courage to the disheartened, hope to the distressed and the despairing. We know how it calls into the face of light which was never there before, and which is not of earth. In the remarkable play, The Passing of the Third Floor Back, we have a striking illustration of the subtle, silent force of the love motive. Those who have seen or read the play will remember how in response to an advertisement in a London paper, room to let, third floor back, becomes a remarkable man who is given the title of the Stranger. This man takes the third floor back and finds himself in a boarding house filled with questionable characters, petty thieves, gamblers, people who have led fast lives, all sorts of uncharitable, envious men and women. They stoop to every kind of meanness. One woman even steals candles. Everyone tries to cheat everyone else and is cheated in return. The landlady is of the same type as her boarders. She preys on them and they prey on her. She waters the milk and adulterates the food. Then to keep herself from being robbed, she puts everything under lock and key. The mere presence of the stranger seems antagonistic to the practices and low-flying ideals of the boarders and the landlady. They begin to make all sorts of fun of him, but he takes no notice. Instead, he gives them kindness for unkindness, love for hate, and a pleasant smile as the only answer to their sarcastic, cutting remarks and innuendos. Gradually, as they become better acquainted, he begins to talk with them of themselves, to point out their good qualities, and to show them what great ability they have in certain lines, what wonderful things are possible to them. He told one of the young men who had made merry at his expense that he had a fine artistic temperament, and that he had in him the making of a great artist. He showed another his possibilities as a musician, and so on with every member of the discordant, jangling group, until each one finally came under the spell of his love and kindness. The little London slavey, or maid-of-all-work, who was abused and constantly reminded that she had been in state prison and hence was a nobody, under the stranger's uplifting influence became a self-respecting, noble woman. The landlady, who had hitherto treated the girl like a slave, began to favor her, and made her go outdoors and get a little change while she did the work. A man and wife who had lived a cat-and-dog life were brought together in harmony. All of the boarders, without exception, even those who had been the most brutal and selfish, gradually changed and became thoughtful, helpful and kindly toward one another. They became friends. The whole atmosphere of the house was changed. The stranger had shown every man and woman of them his or her better self, and in so doing had literally made them anew. Thus did one who typified the Christ spirit, a simple, quiet man who loved his fellow men and found his greatest joy in serving others, manage to divert all these people out of the crooked channels in which they had lived and into the right path toward happiness. Love, discovering to them these higher possible selves, transformed them. This is love's way. Love tames the fiercest animals. How quickly their wild, ferocious expression is replaced by a milder, softer, more gentle one under the kindly treatment of one who really loves them, one who looks upon them as did St. Francis, as his little dumb brothers and sisters. The brute nature is gradually softened and distrust gives way to confidence. The suspicious look is replaced by a trustful one. Affection takes the place of dislike and fear. Love goes out to meet love. Is there any more beautiful illustration in nature of the influence of love and kindly treatment than the evolution of our pet dogs from the ferocious wolf? Note the gentle, peaceful face of a cow or a horse which has been brought up as a family pet. Such animals would not step on or injure a child any more than we would ourselves. We love and trust them, and they love and trust us in return. Love begets love. Some people mistake selfishness or self-love for real love. Everywhere we see the sort of base substitute which says, "If you do this for me, I'll do that for you." The woman that says to a man in her heart, if not with her lips, "If you'll support me and give me a home, I'll love you," does not love. This is selfishness. A great many people confuse love of the thing given with the love of the giver. They mistake the love of their own comforts, of a good time, of dress and luxuries, for love of the person who supplies them with these things. This is a mere travesty of the genuine thing. Love simply loves and asks nothing in return. There is no self in it. Abuse, bitterness, indifference, ingratitude do not change or destroy love. It simply loves on, and no love is ever lost, whether it is returned or not. Genuine love is a force that always wins out. Even if it's not reciprocated, it wins by chastening, softening, elevating, beautifying, and enriching the life of the one who loves. This is love's way. What mothers endure for many years for their children would kill them or drive them to an insane asylum in half the time but for love. This is the healing balm that cures all hurts, lightens all burdens, that takes the drudgery out of service. It is love alone that enables the poor mother to risk her life for her child, to go through terrible experiences in her struggles with poverty and sickness to rear her children. A burden half as great which had no love in it would crush the life out of her. But love lightens the load, takes the sting out of poverty, the pain out of sacrifice. The same thing is true of the loving father, though his burden in the nature of things is rarely as heavy as the mother's. But he is often virtually a slave for half a lifetime or more for those he loves, and if he is a real man he does not complain. Love lightens the burden and cheers the way. Where the heart is, there the burden is light. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another, as I have loved you, love ye also one another. In the literal fulfilling of this command lies the salvation of the world. Among the many noble souls of our time who have tried to live in accordance with it, one of the most conspicuous was Count Leo Tolstoy. In one of his own beautiful stories, Tolstoy shows how everyone, no matter what his station or how poor his circumstances, may do this, by following the Master's example in treating every human being as we would a loved member of our own family. A very devout Russian peasant, so runs the story, had prayed for years that the Master might sometime come to his humble cabin home. One night he had a vision in which the Master appeared to him and told him he would come to his cabin the next day. Filled with joy, the peasant awoke. So real seemed his vision that he arose and immediately went to work putting his cabin to rights and preparing for the unexpected heavenly guest. A terrible storm of sleet and snow raged throughout the day. While performing his simple household duties, heaping fresh logs in his crude fireplace, preparing his pot of cabbage soup, the Russian peasant's daily dish, the man would look out into the storm with anxious, expectant eyes. Presently he saw a poor, half-frozen peddler with a pack on his back struggling toward the light, but almost overcome by the fierce blasts of snow and sleet that beat upon him. The peasant rushed out and brought the wayfarer into his cabin. He dried his clothing, warmed him, fed him some of the cabbage soup, and started him on his way again, comforted and rejoicing. In a little while he saw another traveler, a poor old woman, trying feebly to beat her way against the blinding snow. Her also the compassionate peasant took into his cabin. He warmed and fed her, wrapped his own coat about her, and, strengthened and encouraged, sent her too on her way. The day wore slowly away, and darkness approached, but still no sign of the Master. Hoping against hope, the man went once again to his cabin door, and looking out into the storm, he saw a little child, who was utterly unable to make his way against the blinding sleet and ice. He took the half-frozen child in his arms, brought it into the cabin, warmed it and fed it, and soon the little wanderer fell asleep before the fire. Sorely disappointed because the Master had not yet appeared, the peasant sat gazing into the fire, and as he gazed, he fell asleep. Suddenly the room was radiant with a light that did not come from the fire, and there stood the Master, white-robed and serene, looking upon him with a smile. "Ah, Master, I have waited and watched all this long day, but thou didst not come." The Master replied, "3 times have I visited thy cabin today. The poor peddler whom thou rescued, warmed and fed, that was I. The poor woman to whom thou gavest thy coat, that was I. And this little child whom thou hast saved from the tempest, that is I. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me." The Christ vision faded. The peasant awoke. He was alone with the child, who was smiling in its sleep, but he knew that the Master had visited his cabin. "The love of God, the love of God," I said, and the words through all my being went. A sudden shudder of light, the firmament, no otherwise seems riven by the red, jagged lightning flash that quivers overhead, when for an instant heaven and earth are blent. For a dazzling space in my heart was rent, and I beheld, but all had fled, nor has returned, yet on my way, along the pave or through the clanging mart. Sometimes a stranger's eye falls full on mine. You too? We have no speech, we make no sign, but something seems to pass from heart to heart, and I am full of gladness all that day. C. A. Price in Scribner's Magazine. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Victorious Attitude by Orison Swett Marden. Where your supply is. He who darest assert the I may calmly wait, while hurrying fate meets his demand with sure supply. Helen Wilmans. Never affirm or think about yourself, your prospects, your career, or your happiness what you do not wish to come true. Every child should be taught to expect success and happiness, to believe that the good things in the world are intended for him. We can never get more out of ourselves than we expect. If we expect large things, demand them. If we hold the large mental attitude toward our work, toward our life, we shall get much greater results than if we depreciate ourselves and look only for little things. The man who dares not assert the I, with undaunted assurance, with the conscious vigor and determination of one who believes in his divinity, will never do great things, because he will never make the demand that will draw a sure supply. Before one can hope to win out in any undertaking, he must be able to say, I, positively, with the force of conviction. He must polarize his mind to the positive attitude. This is the attitude that creates, that produces results in the world of matter as well as in the realm of spirit. The positive man is forceful because he has faith in himself. He forms his opinions without the aid of others and is not afraid to stand for what he thinks. He does not hesitate to differ with others. He is not a mush of concession, like the negative weakling who subscribes to what every one he meets says, thinks, or believes. He makes statements with positiveness, without hesitation. The Bible would never have gained such a dominating place in the life of the race had it referred to authorities to substantiate its statements, had it tried to prove its doctrines. Much of its supremacy has come from its tremendous positiveness, its vigorous affirmation of facts. You will find nothing negative or wishy-washy in the great book. Its assertions are imperious, positive, dogmatic. It is one perpetual hammering, driving home of truths, of great fundamental facts. The biblical writers speak with assurance and authority because of their profound conviction of the truths they utter. They do not argue or plead, they affirm. There is no appeal. As has been well said of the Bible, it never appeals to readers for confirmation. It states. Every line breathes dominance, superiority, and confidence. We find the same imperious dominant qualities, the same positiveness in great leaders of men. They deal in affirmations. They throw themselves with intense conviction into whatever they attempt. They continually, both mentally and vocally, assert their power to do it. And the result is a natural corollary. They succeed in what they attempt. The difference between the positive and the negative mind, the man who can assert the I with vigor and the man who cannot, is the difference between success and failure. The positive man keys his life to the I can note, the negative man to the I can't. The positive man denies the limitations of environment, of resources, of opportunities. He not only believes but knows that infinite bounty surrounds him and that he can make it his own. The negative man, on the other hand, will not fight against environment, no matter how hard it may be, but will yield to it without a struggle. He sees limitations and difficulties everywhere. To him, obstacles are insurmountable. But for the positive, dominant qualities in man, we would still be living in caves and eating our food raw. It is the positive, forceful man that overcomes. Obstacles do not frighten or turn him from his purpose. They are to him but the apparatus in the gymnasium, which give him additional strength and reinforce his determination to achieve. He knows that he can command the infinite supply, that the great forces of the universe are working for him, and that he has only to direct them. He knows that it is his birthright to conquer, that the Creator put him here for that very purpose, to overcome, to grow, to ascend, to be godlike. Everyone has sufficient positive power to guide and direct his own life if he will only use and develop that power. If he does not use it, he will lose. If you do not think and act for yourself, if you do not assert yourself and push your own way, the forces about you will take command and push you. Remember this. When you are pushed, you go downhill, and when you push yourself, you go uphill. Everyone is either pusher or pushed in this world. Even the kingdom of heaven is taken by violence. He who would attain it must be aggressive for truth. No namby-pamby weakling who is afraid to stand on his own feet and fight for the right can get there. If you ever expect to do anything to justify your existence, quit looking for some outside agent which will move your life train. Your power is coiled up right inside you. There is where your engine is. The name of that engine is I. Use the great force at your command. Get up steam and forge ahead. You will never get very far by any other means. You are only losing time in trying to get any power outside of yourself, impulse or influence, to move you forward. When the Creator made you a co-partner in His work, He put inside of you all the machinery necessary for the part you were to play. Claim what He intended for you. Develop and use your machinery, and no power on earth can hold you back from the goal that you set for yourself. Say to yourself, "It is my duty to make good, to obey that inner urge, that ambition prod which ever bids me up and on. I am resolved never again to allow anything to interfere with the free and untrammeled exercise of my physical and mental faculties. I will unfold all the possibilities that the Creator has enfolded in the ego, the I of me. There is no lost day in God's calendar, no allowance for waste, and I am determined henceforth to make the most of the stuff that has been given me, to play the part of a son of omnipotence." As a matter of fact, every day has a splendid possible prize awaiting every human being, a prize which no money can buy. It can be obtained only at the price of splendid effort and self-assertion. We are too timid, too fearful of results, even to attempt what we long to do, and we are too easy with ourselves, too willing to drift with the tide of our moods. Every man who has ever achieved grandly has been a stern schoolmaster to himself. He has incessantly affirmed his ideal and held himself unwaveringly to its realization. By cultivating the positive we drive out the negative. This is a psychological law. It is to empty by filling. Affirmation is always more potent than negation. Professor Halleck says, "By restraining of an emotion we can frequently throttle it. By inducing an expression we can often cause its allied emotions." Professor William James makes a similar statement. "Refuse to express a passion," he says, "and it dies. Count 10 before venting your anger and its occasion seems ridiculous. Whistling to keep up courage is no mere figure of speech. On the other hand, sit all day in a moping posture, sigh, and reply to everything with a dismal voice, and your melancholy lingers. There is no more valuable precept in moral education than this, as all of us who have experience know. If we wish to conquer undesirable emotional tendencies in ourselves, we must assiduously and in the first instant cold-bloodedly go through the outward movements of those contrary dispositions which we wish to cultivate. Smooth the brow, brighten the eye, contract the dorsal rather than the ventral aspect of the frame, and speak in a major key. Pass the genial compliment and your heart must indeed be frigid if it does not gradually thaw." Few of us realize the tremendous force there is in the vigorous, incessant affirmation of conditions which we long to establish. United with the visualizing of man or woman, we yearn to be the thing we are determined to achieve. It becomes an irresistible power in shaping events. Act the part, affirm the possession, the assured realization of the thing desired, and it will tend to materialize. This is a fundamental law of creation. What is called autosuggestion, or self-suggestion, is one of the most active agencies employed in mind building. We can literally make our minds thought by thought, as we can our bodies, fiber by fiber, through vigorous affirmation. There is a mysterious power in the spoken word which gets a greater hold upon us than simply passing the same word through the mind, or looking at it on the printed page. The vocal expression of a thought makes a greater impression upon the memory and especially influences the subconscious mind. It works like a leaven in the whole nature, putting agents in motion that establish a connection between us and our desires, the objects for which we are working. The persistent affirmation of our ability to do that which we have undertaken in a superb, kingly fashion is a great stimulus, a positive creative force. There is nothing more helpful in building a strong positive character than bracing yourself up by searching, heart-to-heart talks with yourself. In this way, better perhaps than in any other, you can take stock of your mental assets and improve yourself along the line. If you are timid, for instance, or even feel if you are something of a coward, stoutly deny it. Insist that you are no shirker, no coward, that you are brave even to daring. Boldly assume the quality of a hero. Vehemently affirm that you actually possess invincible courage, and you will be surprised at your immediate increase of strength and positiveness. Deny that you have any weakness, defect, or deficiency which can handicap your career. Insist upon affirming the positive quality, the winning quality. If you lack decision, if you are a waverer, a vacillator, if you are a putter off of things, if procrastination runs in your blood, persistently affirm that you possess the opposite qualities. At the same time, resolve that you are going not only to play the heroic part in life, that you are not only going to begin to work upon the duty awaiting you, but that you are going to put it through, that you are going to do things, and that you will never again allow yourself to waver, to procrastinate in the smallest matter, even if you do make mistakes now and then. Better make a mistake and forge ahead than to remain negative and inactive. The habit of vigorous affirmation is the habit of victory. But remember that action must follow on the heels of resolution, or you will never go any farther. Affirmation and resolution without prompt endeavor for realization are worse than useless. It is the man of action, of continued and repeated action, the man who never acknowledges defeat who ultimately wins out. During our Civil War the Southern generals said it didn't do any good to beat Grant, because he never knew when he was beaten and, consequently, wouldn't stay beaten. Men who leave their mark on the world are men of iron resolution, of grim determination. If youth were only taught at home and in school the power of an inflexible resolve, an inexorable affirmation of the thing they are determined to accomplish, if they were only taught the invincibleness of an unshakable will, of the positive victorious mental attitude, of a resolve which knows no defeat, life would not be half so hard. Nerve us with incessant affirmatives. Don't bark against the bad, but chant the beauties of the good. The positive, creative, affirmative elements are our friends. They draw us our sure supply. All negatives are our enemies. They drive away supply. Affirm the good, never the bad, the bright, never the dark, the true and never the false. Harmony, never discord. We should never forget that whatever tends to optimism is ready to give us a lift. The first step toward a happy, successful life is to get control of the supply that is ready to flow in answer to our demand. This you can do by forming the habit of affirming that the best will come to you, that only the things that are good for you can come into your life. Don't let yourself slip into the foolish habit of anticipating trouble, misfortune, sickness, disaster, accidents. To anticipate or expect such things is to affirm their reality and draw them to you. The habit of anticipating them will get them into the habit of arriving. You will thus be drawn into a current of circumstances corresponding to the character of your negative thought. Put yourself into a positive, success and happiness attitude the first thing every morning by taking time, even if only a few minutes, to communicate with the Creator. Get into tune with the Infinite, the source of your strength, the moment you awake. Keep yourself in harmony with the principle which underlies your being during the day, and your every act will be a step forward on the desired road. Say to yourself constantly, "Happiness is my birthright. I was made to exalt in life, not go about with a long, sad, dejected face as though it had been a bitter disappointment, as though I were a misfit in the world. I was made to radiate joy and gladness and go through life as a conqueror. I am indeed a child of the Creator, and I know that I am." It is a positive insult to Him to go through the world as though I were a beggar, a slave. I bear the image of the King of Kings, and it is my business to make all men see the likeness. It is my duty to prove my divine heritage by radiating royal manhood. I know of no practice which will do more for one's growth and life enlargement than the habit of rising above one's moods and discouragements through perpetual affirmation of one's divinity. If, for example, you get up in the morning feeling negative, blue, and discouraged, If you don't feel like working at anything, just go off alone and have a good heart-to-heart talk with yourself, something like this. Now look here, young man or young woman, none of this. You are going to do a grand day's work today. You are going to get right out of this condition. You have had enough of it. If you are a real man or woman, you will rise above your mood and wring victory out of this day, even though it looks so unpromising. It does not matter what comes or what goes, what happens or what does not happen. There is one thing I'm sure of, and that is I'm going to be positive, creative, to get the most possible out of today. I am not going to allow anything to rob me of my happiness or my right to live this day through from beginning to end, and not merely to exist. I do not care what comes. I shall not allow any annoyance, any happening, any circumstance which may cross my path to rob me of my power and peace of mind. I will not be unhappy today, no matter what occurs. I am going to enjoy it to its fullest capacity. This shall be a complete day in my life. I shall not allow the enemies of my happiness to mar it. No misfortune in the past, nothing which has happened to me in days gone by, which has been disagreeable or tragic. No enemies of efficiency shall be guests in my spirit's sacred enclosure today. Only happy thoughts, joy thoughts, friend thoughts shall find entertainment in my soul this day. No negative thoughts, none of my enemies shall gain admittance to scrawl their hideous autographs on the walls of my mind. There shall be no admittance today except to the friends of my best moods. I will tear down all black, sable pictures and hang in their place pictures of joy and gladness, of things which will encourage, cheer, and increase my power. Everything which ever handicapped my life, which has made me uncomfortable and unhappy, shall be expelled from my mental kingdom this day and every coming day. If you make a resolve like this every morning and live up to it during the day, you cannot help being positive, productive, creative. The positive mind repels all thought enemies that would hinder progress. Doubt, fear, despair, worry, these have no place in the creative brain. They are products of the negative mind. The man who would bend circumstances to his will cannot afford to harbor them. Hold negative, despondent, discouraged thoughts, and your surroundings will be negative, unpropitious. Hold positive, confident, hopeful, cheerful thoughts, and a congenial environment will manifest itself. It is wonderful what right thinking can accomplish even in a naturally weak, negative mind. The insistent and persistent holding of the positive thought, the assurance thought, the self-confidence, the self-faith thought, the determined effort to think and act for oneself, to direct one's own forces will gradually change a negative, non-productive mentally into a positive, creative one. I have known very timid, sensitive people who scarcely dared to say their souls were their own before others, to so cure their habit of self-effacement and so strengthen their weak self-confidence by constant audible affirmation of their own strength, that in a very few months they had largely overcome this weakness. Fear is negative, courage is positive, affirmative. If we could make our lives effective, we must root out all of the things which keep us in discord, all negative elements, and give ourselves over to the power of affirmation. Many a person has ruined his life effort by depreciating it and sending out to those about him the negative vibration of his inferiority. We radiate our faith, our confidence in ourselves or our doubts, and distrust. Others catch the contagion of our opinion of ourselves. Whatever you do, don't set up your own mind in that of others a picture of yourself as weak, ineffective, negative personality. People do not realize the harm they do by making uncomplimentary and unfavorable remarks about themselves. It does not matter what it may be. The assertion of anything unfavorable to us or unlike what we wish to be is injurious. How often we hear men and women say, "I can never remember anything. I'm always forgetting umbrellas and packages. I can never remember the names or faces," and similar negative, depreciatory remarks. It never occurs to them that by making such statements as these, they are strengthening their defects. They are not aware that by impressing these unfortunate images of themselves upon their mind mirror, they are seriously injuring their self-confidence, their ultimate chance of being what they would like to be, or of getting what they desire. The character of civilization would radically be changed in a short time if parents were to teach their children the wonderful, strengthening, character-building power in the habit of affirmation. If boys and girls were impressed with the truth that the constant affirming of the good, the beautiful, and the true, the insistent holding of the ideal of themselves as they would like to be, is a real creative force that tends to actualize what they long for, many of the problems of the race would be solved. As a matter of fact, the worst enemy, as well as the best friend, any human being ever has is inside of him. The very mental attitude of the majority of people is utterly antagonistic to their advancement. A really brainy professional man whom I meet quite often is a striking example of the baneful effects of the negative, self-depreciatory thought. He wanted to do something big in his line, but he has had only mediocre success, and in consequence has so soured on life that he seems to have lost the power to enjoy himself. The truth is, the early contracted habit of self-castigation and unfavorable comparison with others who were more fortunate at the start has stayed by him through the years, and practically disqualified his mind for real enjoyment or for making the most of his talents. Another negative character of this type is a man in commercial life who is forever recalling his lack of opportunities. He never tires of referring to the fact that he was handicapped at his very birth by a slovenly, slipshod father, and that all through life he has been placed at a great disadvantage compared with other men. He believes and constantly affirms that he is unlucky, that he has never been at the right spot at the right time, that no matter how hard he works he feels a mysterious something holding him back. Some malignant fate or destiny, he complains, is always tripping him up, thwarting his most strenuous efforts, overturning his best laid plans. Through its machinations, though he has worked harder than anybody else he knows, he and his family have remained in poverty, while his associates have become prosperous. The cause of this man's failure is not far to seek. It is plain that he started wrong and has been going wrong ever since. He has been talking failure all of his life, affirming hard times, poverty, ill luck, and disappointment. He has been sowing thistles and all sorts of ill weeds in his garden, and yet he wonders why his harvests have been so stingy, so blighted, and overshadowed by weeds. Affirmations, acts, motives, ambitions, mental attitudes are seeds sown in human gardens. Their character determines what our harvests shall be. Our future reaping depends entirely on our past sowing. What we are enjoying or suffering today is the result of yesterday's sowing. We are reaping weeds, thistles, or beautiful flowers and luscious fruit according to the seeds we have sown. The only soil in which our good seed thoughts will flourish is that of mental harmony. In this fruitful ground lies the secret of all efficiency and happiness. To come into unity with the author of our being is to realize perfect mental harmony. And this is the first requisite of an efficient life, a goal that can be reached only by the road of constant, unfailing affirmation. When you long for something that is perfectly legitimate for you to have, sow your affirmation seed in perfect confidence that it will bloom in reality. Say to yourself, "Our Father, Mother God, is no respecter of persons. He is not partial in His treatment of His children. They all have the same rights, the same privilege. He will give me through my own effort what I need, what I ask for. The poorest, most ragged wretch that crawls has just as many hours in his day as has the ermine king. I can and I will do what I long to do. I will be what I desire to be." Affirm this again and again to yourself. Do not wait for an opportunity. Make your opportunity. The power of affirmation will work miracles for you. Most people seem to think that if they were only in an ideal environment, without worry or anxiety regarding the living-getting problem, if they were free from pain and in vigorous health, they would then be perfectly happy. But, as a matter of fact, we are not half so dependent for happiness upon environment, upon circumstances, as we imagine we are. False ambition, envy, and jealousy are responsible for much of our uneasiness, our restlessness and discontent. Our minds are so intent upon what other people have and are doing that we do not get the tithe of the enjoyment and satisfaction out of our own work, out of our own possessions, that they should afford us. We think so much about what others have and spend so much time wondering why we cannot have similar things that we do not see the beauty, loveliness, and sweetness in our own environment. We question and envy when we should affirm and realize. We neglect the most potent means within our grasp, the miracle working power of affirmation. The supply will come in answer to our demand. Every one of us has an inalienable right to be comfortable, prosperous, free from anxiety, in short, to be happy. Man was not intended to be a worrying machine. The fundamental principle of the human constitution is based on harmony, and when we are in harmonious relations with the universe, we attain the maximum efficiency of power, of usefulness to the world. It is then we get the maximum enjoyment and happiness out of life. Is it not worthwhile to get into such relations? Is it not foolish to remain in discord when by the simple process of affirmation, linked with divine faith and effort, we can transform ourselves and our environment? End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Victorious Attitude by Orison Swett Marden. The Triumph of Health Ideals. What is the body, after all, but the spirit breaking through the flesh, or health but beauty in the organism? Every good emotion makes a health and life-promoting change in the body. Every thought is registered in the brain by a physical change more or less permanent in the tissue cells. The coming man will find it as easy to counteract an unfriendly, vicious thought by turning on the counter thought to neutralize it, as to rob the hot water of its burning power by turning on the cold water faucet. There is a divine something in man which never was sick and never can be. That divine self, the image of the Creator, perfect, unchangeable, indestructible, immortal, and which sometime and somewhere must drive out all trace of sin, disease, and death in mankind. Hufeland. Even those who do not believe in Christian Science as a whole must be impressed with the scientists' wonderful religious optimism. Their inspiring mental attitude, the hopeful way in which they face life, always looking toward the light, toward health, toward prosperity, toward success, and turning their backs upon the darkness, upon everything which can mar their health, their efficiency, their happiness, is creating a new world for thousands of discouraged souls. Christian Scientists insist that since God has created everything that is, and since He is perfect, is all in all, He could not possibly create anything unlike Himself, such as disease or anything else that is not good for His children. God is harmony, they reason, and He could not create discord. He is truth, and He could not create error. God is love, and He could not create the opposite of love, hatred, jealousy, envy, selfishness, any evil emotion or passion. Hence, all disease, all discord, all the enemies of the race, all satanic influences in the world must be accounted for in some other way than as decrees of His will. For perfection could not have produced these imperfections. Love could not create anything antagonistic to itself. Scientists take a positive and vigorous stand against the admission to their mind of any of the enemies of their health, their prosperity, their happiness, or their destiny. Not only is all thought of failure and poverty banished, but they close the portals of their mind against fear, worry, and anxiety, against the ravages of jealousy, the poison of hatred, envy, and selfishness. They try to keep their mental realm clear of all black, forbidding pictures, of all sorts of distressing emotions and unfriendly thoughts, while they open it to the things which help, inspire, and bring hope, the friend thoughts and emotions, joy, gladness, love, truth, and divine inspiration. They believe that all human beings were not only made to be healthy but also to be happy, successful, prosperous. They regard poverty, no less than illness, as a mental disease, to be treated in the same manner as bodily disease. And this cheerful religious optimism which they try steadily to maintain is not alone a healing force, but is also a great disease-resisting power. Health, wholeness, is one of the most important and necessary factors in attainment of those things which every normal human being desires: peace, power, plenty, success, and happiness. The scientist's religious optimism is a potent force for placing the mind in the most favorable condition for the attainment of all these things. It removes all hindrances to full, complete self-expression. It is just as necessary to hold the victorious attitude toward health as it is to hold the victorious attitude toward our career and everything which affects it. It is just as necessary to get rid of our doubts and fears regarding our physical well-being as it is to get rid of our doubts and fears regarding our ability to succeed. If we would be strong and vigorous, it is quite important as to visualize health, to hold the health ideal, to keep the perfect health picture constantly in the mind, as it is to keep the prosperity, the success ideal in the mind when we are striving for an independence. The habit of always holding a high ideal in our health, of thinking of ourselves as well, vigorous, physically and mentally perfect, will go very far toward building up a strong disease-resisting barrier between ourselves and all our health enemies. On the other hand, people who never think of themselves as whole, healthy, active and robust, but who constantly hold in mind a picture of themselves as weak, ailing, without vim or stamina, with little or no disease-resisting power, are liable at any time to become victims of disease. The building up of a strong health thought barrier, a vigorous health conviction between ourselves and disease is the best sort of health insurance. Fearing disease, thinking ill health, visualizing physical suffering is the surest way of attracting those things. Physicians know that the awful incubus of doubt and worry in the minds of patients, the fear that their disease may be fatal, is the greatest obstacle to their recovery. We head toward our doubts, our fears, our convictions regarding our health, just as we do toward our doubts, fears, and conviction regarding other things. If we are convinced that we are not going to be strong, rugged, virile, if we fear that we are likely to develop inherited weakness and disease tendencies, we are headed toward these conditions and will probably realize them. On the contrary, if we hold the victorious attitude toward health, if we visualize the health ideal, the health conviction, we head mentally toward health. And what we head toward mentally is the pattern of that which is continually being built into our life structure. A healthy body is healthy thought externalized. Man's normal condition is that of robust health, vigorous vitality, tremendous power of endurance. The Creator evidently intended the human machine to run harmoniously, without friction, without weakness or disability of any kind. The created is part of the Creator, an indestructible part of Him. When we rise to a full consciousness of this, we shall be victors over disease instead of victims of it. We shall be conquerors instead of slaves of conditions. Nearly a century ago, a celebrated German physician said that there is something in man which was never born, is never sick and never dies, and that it is this something, this omnipotent force within, which in reality heals our diseases. No matter what we may call it, this something that repairs and renews is one with the force that creates us. We may name it variously the God principle, the Christ within us, the divine principle, the omnipotent force, or anything else we please. The name doesn't matter. All mean the same thing, that is, the creative, the all-sustaining force that holds the universe in harmony. There is something in you that is lord over your physical organs. There is a power in you, back of the flesh, but not of it, which dominates the flesh, and that is the real you. Your partner in that power is the intelligence that created you. You are indissolubly interlinked with that intelligence. You can no more be wiped out of existence than the Creator who made you, because you are an immortal expression of Himself. You are His masterpiece, and His work must partake of His qualities, of His perfection, of His omnipotence, of His omniscience. The trouble with us is we do not rise to the power and dignity of our divinity. We do not half believe we are divine. We have a sort of vague theory that we are mere puppets, thrown off as separate units into space, without any vital connection with the power that gave us life. This false theory is causing our sufferings. The reason why we are such shriveled scrub oaks of human beings is found in the dried up, mean, stingy ideal of ourselves, which we have been taught to hold. We have been reared to think of ourselves as poor miserable worms of the dust, unworthy to come into the presence of our Father Mother God, even though we are fashioned in His image. Instead of carrying through life an ideal of our mental and physical perfection, we carry an ideal of a defective, diseased, physically and mentally imperfect being. The mind being the molder of the body, the life-giving process within us build the sort of body that answers to the model in the mind, the ideal which we hold of ourselves. What we really believe ourselves to be, we tend to become. We keep our minds filled with all sorts of discord, sick pictures, and of course all of these mental images reappear in the body, react upon the life. On the other hand, every time we affirm that we are one with the creative force of the universe, that nothing can separate us from our oneness with the One, we tend to build our bodies into the ideal state of perfect health, mental, physical, and moral wholeness. If we could hold continually to the ideal of our wholeness, and visualize ourselves as perfect beings, even as He is perfect, and constantly try to live up to our ideal, any tendency to imperfection, to discord, to disease would be eliminated. We are only just beginning to realize the tremendous import of the idea that we really fashion our bodies to correspond with our thoughts, that we are co-creators of ourselves with the divine power which is back of the flesh, but not of it. A prominent surgeon, in speaking of infantile paralysis, says that the physician's mental attitude toward it has a great deal to do with its cure, and that he should hold firmly in the mind the idea that the disease is curable. Every physician should also be a metaphysician. He should be a profound believer in the principle that the power which created the patient can recreate him, can repair damages, restore diseased and lost tissues. The most advanced physicians do believe that at best they can but help nature in her healing process. They realize that the same power which created the patient is present in the healing of every wound, every broken bone and every hurt we suffer. The surgeon sets the bone, dresses the wound, but the same power that first created the flesh and bone must do the healing. The mental healer vigorously denies the reality of disease in the sense that truth is a reality. To him, all is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, as Mrs. Eddy says, and therefore all must be good. Only the good can be real, as God made all that is. The persistent denial that anything could exist which the Creator did not create, and that He could make anything unlike Himself, is one of the fundamental principles of the Christian Science faith. To the healer, health is a vital, immortal principle, the everlasting fact, and disease, although it seems painfully real to the sufferer, is but a false belief. The healer holds in mind only what he desires to establish in his patient's mind. He shuts out everything else. Health is what he wishes to establish, and to do this he holds incessantly and tenuously to the health ideal. He refuses to see the sick, diseased man or woman, and persists in visualizing the ideal one that God intended. To him, the defective, deficient, suffering being which disease and physical discord have made is not the real man or woman. That being is only a travesty of the ideal, perfect creature the Creator planned. He does not allow himself to think of or to picture disease symptoms. To visualize the physical appearance of disease would be to acknowledge its reality, and this would be to defeat his healing. He could not, for example, cure cancer or tuberculosis while mentally picturing the horrible symptoms of these diseases. He wishes to keep all such things out of his mind because of their baleful suggestiveness. Visualizing them would merely etch their reality deeper and deeper into his consciousness, and the suggestion would be conveyed into the patient's consciousness. The mental healer's aim is to produce in the mind of the person he is treating a consciousness of the scientific reality of health and of the unreality of disease. It does not matter how the disease symptoms may contradict his principle, or how loudly pain may scream for recognition. He persists in considering disease unreal and in holding the scientific sense of health as the reality. He relies wholly upon divine mind as the great healing potency, and steadily affirms his patient's oneness with his divine source, and that disease cannot exist in the divine presence. At the very outset he encourages his patient by affirming that, however his physical discord or disease may seem to him, it cannot affect the God image in him, because that is perfect, as God Himself is perfect, and that in reality there can be no disease. Truth and harmony, he asserts, are the great facts of life. Error is not a reality, but merely the absence of truth. Discord is not a reality, but merely the absence of harmony. He assures him that he is God's child, and that God's image cannot be sick, distressed, or diseased. Of course, he says, this seems very real to you, painfully real, but it is not reality in the sense that truth is a reality. This is discord, the absence of harmony. And divine harmony will antidote all discord just as truth will neutralize error, and as love will neutralize all hatred, jealousy, or revenge, or as confidence, self-assurance will neutralize fear, doubt, or self-depreciation. The healer holds continually the healing suggestions and concentrates on arousing in his patient expectancy of relief by bracing his hope, confidence, assurance, and faith in divine mind that restores, renews, and heals. He tries to stimulate and put into active operation the healing potencies latent in him, to awaken in his mind the lost divine image, and to impress upon him the idea that this divine image cannot possibly be dominated or in any other way affected by disease. I have seen a chemist pour a few drops of liquid from different crucibles into a jar of muddy water, and in a few minutes the mud would disappear and the water be as pure as crystal. This is in effect what the mental healer does in treating a patient. No matter what the disease is, his great remedy lies in mental chemistry, in neutralizing, destroying the error with its natural antidote. The healer's constant affirmation that there can be no sickness, no disease in God's image in man, is a powerful suggestion which tends to weaken the grip of error in his patient's body. The very shutting out of all fear, of the terror of disease and death, is a great step towards a cure, because these things are depressing to all bodily functions. Everything that discourages, that makes the patient despondent, is a great devitalizer, and constantly lowers his disease-resisting power. The arousing belief that the healer is a sort of motorman who puts up the patient's dropped trolley pole, thus making connection with the wire carrying infinite power, or that he is a wireless operator who is connecting him with his divine source, the source of health and happiness, and that he is actually receiving the flow of divine force, of peace, of immortal life, is of itself a tremendous healing agency. When he has succeeded in establishing in the mind of his patient the vigorous conviction that health is the everlasting principle, the great fundamental unavoidable fact, the healer has gone far toward establishing a scientific consciousness of health, and has laid a most important health foundation. After a little practice a sick person can do wonderful things for himself through the vitalizing force of autosuggestion. He can be his own physician. He can recover health and keep it by applying to himself the same principles that the healer applies to his patient. In this way he can keep himself in conscious union with the divine source of all supply, of all good, all health. There are sufficient latent potencies in every human being, if he would only arouse and make them operative, to keep him in health and harmony. We can all be our own healers if we will. The stream must be as pure as its fountainhead unless contaminated later, and there is where we humans come in. We contaminate the health stream with our thought poisons, our doubts, our fears, our unbeliefs, our brutal passions, our selfishness, our greed, our hatreds, our jealousies, our revenge, our ingratitude for life, for the blessings we enjoy. All of these things tend to pollute the stream which we receive pure as it flows from the crystal fountain, the divine source of all good. But the practice of divine chemistry will enable us to clear up our muddy life streams. We have in ourselves the remedies which will neutralize the vicious poisons we have allowed to flow into and befoul our life stream. We can, by the right use of our powers, purify it, as the chemist purified the jar of muddy water. By right thinking we can neutralize the poison sewage of our bodies, just as the chemist can take the foul sewage water which flows out from a city, and by the help of chemicals neutralize all the filth, making it absolutely pure again. By applying their antidotes we can neutralize the poisons of disease, the results of wrong thinking and living, which sap and embitter our lives, which make us suffer from all sorts of ills and leave us unable to accomplish 1/10 of what we might if we had that splendid physical and mental vigor which is normal to humanity. We must offer the same uncompromising opposition to the reality of all kinds of disease, mental and physical, that the mental healer does. We must see ourselves as he sees his patient, in the wholeness, the completeness, the Creator intended. It is the ideal man or woman we must visualize, never the one weakened, deformed by horrible diseases or their symptoms. By recognizing only the real man or woman, unaffected by wrong thinking, we cut off the vicious effects of the mental enemies which are fighting to perpetuate disease or other unfortunate conditions. The constant holding of the health ideal, of the truth thought, the health and prosperity thought, the optimistic thought, the kindly, cheerful, helpful thought, and the shutting out of all their opposites, not only help to restore health, but also tremendously the disease-resisting power. Right thought is health, efficiency, and happiness tonic. The vital thing in establishing health is to adopt the victorious attitude toward it as toward every other good thing we desire. If we wish to have abounding health, and who doesn't, we must cultivate implicit faith in health as our birthright, in the truth that, being the children of perfection, we must partake of the qualities of perfection, and hence be free from the imperfection of disease or sickness. Without faith in our wholeness we are not, and cannot be whole. Without faith in the healing power of divine chemistry, no healing is possible either by patient or healer. The patient may not always have a conscious faith, but the healer has, and a similar faith is aroused in the patient later, as he begins to feel the divine power operating and working like a leaven in his nature. There is no one thing that is emphasized so much in the Bible, and especially in Christ's teachings, as faith. Every benefit, every healing depends for its efficacy on the sufferer's faith. In all of his healing, this one condition of faith was imperative. According to thy faith be it unto thee. When the disciples told their master that they could not heal certain cases, he rebuked them, and told them that they had failed because of their lack of faith. According to thy faith be it unto thee, he reiterated constantly. He recognized the great healing power of faith, and impressed upon his followers the truth, that without it no healing was possible. Every physician knows that his patient's faith is in his power to cure him. In the efficacy of the remedies he applies are curative agencies. Faith in medicinal remedies is what makes them effective. It is faith that furnishes the potency of thousands of so-called remedies which have no intrinsic value whatever. We all know how the visualizing of disease and the fear of it affect the mind in undermining the health ideal. Confidence in our health is really its sustaining and buttressing power, for the moment we destroy this we lessen our resisting power and invite disease. The image, perpetually held in the conscious mind, becomes indelibly etched in the subconscious mind, and the body conforms to the thought. To attain perfect health we must hold the image of physical perfection. We must constantly keep in mind this ideal state. We must build ourselves thought pictures of a superb body in all its strength and wholeness. We must relentlessly strangle every image of weakness or disease, every sick suggestion that would blur the picture of perfect wholeness and harmony into which we wish to grow. What a revolution we would make in our lives if we could only learn to live this health ideal instead of its opposite, the disease ideal. Every child should be reared to think health instead of disease, should be made to realize that health is the everlasting fact, that disease is not a necessary evil, and was not intended for us, that it was not intended we should suffer. If the young mind were saturated from infancy with health ideas and ideals, it would build up a strong disease-resisting power that would make it immune to all health enemies. If every child were trained to believe that he was a God in the making, that he had within him the embryo of divinity which ought to develop into a godlike being, we should not have so many mental and physical Lilliputians. One of our great health troubles lies in the fact that we have been accustomed from childhood to lay too much emphasis on matter, on the support of the body. As a matter of fact, the mind is everything, but mind is not confined to the head alone. We are all mind. We think all over. We live all over. Our sensations are the intelligent expression of all the cells of the body. The body is a great cooperative institution composed of billions of cells. Some of these cells have a higher functioning quality than others, but they all have their appointed places. Every cell is an important member of the body corporation and has a voice in the government of the whole. When we are wounded or diseased, for instance, billions of these tiny cell repairers, healers, renewers, health builders, rush instantly to the wounded part to repair and restore the injured tissues. We are all conscious that there is continually going on within us these repairing, renewing, reinvigorating as well as healing processes. We feel that there is a marvelous and beneficent intelligence ever working miracles within us, a power which heals our wounds and cures our hurts. Whence comes the intelligence which governs and directs the work of these little builders and repairers? It comes from the within of us, for our objective mind is comparatively passive in the process. But the great intelligence back of the flesh, which keeps the heart beating, the lungs breathing, and all the various bodily functions in activity, never ceases working and never leaves us for an instant. It permeates every atom of the body, illuminating each separate cell with a reflection of its own light. Scientists are making marvelous discoveries regarding the location of the seat of intelligence, mind. Until recently it was supposed to be confined solely to the brain. But now we know the mind, the brain, or the thinking part of us, extends the entire length of the spinal cord, that there is gray brain matter everywhere in the sympathetic nervous system. In fact, recent experiments indicate selective power in the cells all through the body. Regular gray matter has been found in the fingertips of deaf, dumb, and blind people, thus showing that wherever there is a need there is intelligence. We know what marvels blind and deaf mutes perform by their sense of touch, in distinguishing colors, even fine variations of shades in delicate fabrics, in correctly sensing denominations of paper money and coins, and accurately describing statues and other forms from merely running their fingers over them. This shows that intelligence is everywhere in the body. Some of our foremost scientists now believe that the cells composing each organ form a sort of cooperative community intelligence, which presides over that particular organ. They hold that the bodily organs have what may be termed minds of their own. They are virtually connected with the so-called spinal column brain and the solar plexus brain, as well as with the brain proper. This theory is borne out in fact. We know how quickly the stomach sympathizes with the mental attitude, how it responds to our thoughts, our emotions. Also how quickly the heart, the kidneys respond to our mental states, fear, worry, joy, anxiety, love, hate, jealousy, whatever emotion dominates us. If there were not a very intimate connection between the brain and the stomach, and the same principle applies to the heart, the kidneys, and other organs, the digestion would not be affected so seriously by our changing moods and emotions. Inasmuch as it is so affected, is it not reasonable to assume that the stomach cells are influenced by the thought which you project into them? Is it not reasonable to assume that by sending into these cells black, gloomy, discouraging pictures of indigestion and dyspepsia, you injuriously affect them? If these cells have intelligence, and if they respond instantly to our different mental states, as we know they do, isn't it natural that they should be correspondingly affected by our opinion of them, by our lack of confidence in them, our suspicion of their ability to digest our food properly, by the constant complaining of our stomach and our miserable digestive apparatus? Give a dog a bad name and you might as well kill him, is an old saying. In the same way, impress, force home on your stomach, your heart, your liver, or any other bodily organ the conviction that it is inefficient, weak, good for nothing, and in addition swallow a mouthful of mental dyspepsia with every mouthful of food, and sooner or later it will accept your verdict and be just what you claim it is. In other words, instead of handicapping them by wrong thought, we must give our bodily organs a fair chance to do their legitimate work. If we expect them to act perfectly, as the Creator intended they should, we must treat them as we would treat our children. We must by right thinking help them to be normal instead of making them abnormal by doubting, being suspicious of them. We must visualize them as our co-workers, our partners, our friends, not as our enemies, our tormentors. Just think of the horrible pictures of the various organs people get from medical books, which describe minutely symptoms of diseases which they imagine they have. Many people never visualize a normal picture of themselves. They never think of themselves as the perfect beings God intended them to be. What they hold constantly in mind is a picture of an abnormal, diseased, weak, defective creature. They picture their stomach, their liver, their kidneys, their heart in a diseased, imperfect condition instead of regarding them as friends, as members of the same family. They look on them as malicious enemies who cause them constant suffering. "Oh," they cry out, "I've got such a miserable stomach, I can't eat anything. Everything I eat hurts me. My treacherous old heart, how it pumps. I can't walk or do any of the things I like because of it. My liver is all upset. I seem to be out of kilter everywhere. My kidneys are affected, my back troubles me, and I really might as well be dead." Such a horrible visualizing and belittling of the hard-working bodily organs would ruin the health of the best trained athlete. If you would be a friend to yourself, you must be a friend of your organs, which are so intimately and sympathetically connected with your brain mind, the central station of your body. You must believe in their perfection, in their normal functioning. You must picture them trying to help you to carry out your great life purpose instead of working at cross purposes with you. You must have confidence in them. Think of them as your friends instead of enemies handicapping your success and ruining your chances in life. Replace the pictures of diseased organs with their opposites, pictures of their wholeness, their completeness, their soundness, and you will find yourself coming into health and power. Assume the victorious attitude and think of yourself as an absolutely perfect being, divine, immortal, possessing superb health, a magnificent physique, a vigorous constitution, a sublime mind. Every morning when you rise, before you go to bed at night, and whenever you think of it during the day, stoutly affirm the fact of your perfection physically, mentally, and morally. Constantly assert mentally, and when alone orally, "I am health because I am of God. God is my life. He is the creative power that sustains and upholds me every instant. This power is perpetually recreating me and trying to keep me up to the ideal, the original plan of my being when I was created. I shall cooperate with it today and every day. I shall aim to be perfection even as my Father." There is a great resolve power in the mere resolve to be well, strong, and vigorous, in affirming and tenaciously holding the perfect ideal of ourselves which the Creator had in His plan of us. There is a recreative force in the realization that any departure from this ideal means departure from God, from perfect health, from the reality of the perfect physical, mental, and moral being planned by Him. You will be surprised to see how this mental attitude, this visualized physical ideal, will be reproduced in the body. The mind is the body builder, the great health sculptor, and we cannot surpass our mental model. If there is a weakness or flaw in the thought model, there will be corresponding deficiencies in the health statue. As long as we think ill health, doubt our ability to be strong and vigorous, as long as we hold the conviction of the presence of inherited weakness and disease tendencies, look upon ourselves as victims instead of conquerors of ill health. In short, as long as the mental model is defective, perfect health is impossible. Joyous, abounding health can be established just as anything else can be established, by right thinking and right living, by thinking health instead of disease, thinking strength instead of weakness, harmony instead of discord, thinking true thoughts instead of error thoughts, love thoughts instead of hatred thoughts, health thoughts, upbuilding thoughts instead of destructive, tearing down thoughts. A great many regular physicians now, and soon all will, show patients how they can make use of the great healing, medicinal power of thought, the miracle of right thinking, which unites them with the force back of the flesh. They will show each patient what attitudes of mind, what affirmations, and what autosuggestions will tend to keep him in harmony. They will teach him the healing use of suggestion. The physician of the future will use largely for his remedies, ideas, mental attitudes, and suggestions. The time will come when parents and teachers will realize the tremendous force, the character-building power in the affirmations of health, wholeness, completeness, harmony. They will teach children to exert this power that will drive out discord and dispel disease. They will impress upon the young that affirmation of perfect ideals, holding in the mind the model of a perfect man, a perfect woman, not the one marred, crippled, shorn of strength and beauty by violation of mental law or by vicious living, will protect them from all assaults from without and from within. If that mind was always in us which was in Christ, the mind that gives health, peace, and happiness, that perpetuates harmony, truth, and beauty, we should never know discord of any kind. Perfect health would be the rule and not the exception, because we should never transgress the laws of our being. End of chapter 11.